Good morning and welcome to the Be Formless Flow Driven CEO podcast. I am pretty excited this morning because I am talking with Mickayla Rosard all the way from Minneapolis. I can never get that. I can never pronounce that right. So welcome, Mickayla.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
No, I'm so excited to have you here. And looks like it's sunny over there, over your way. It's cloudy here, but talk about different seasons. You're heading into summer, we're heading into winter. I always find that fascinating.
Me too. Yeah, especially, well, and like it's sunny for a little bit, but it's 5 o'clock as I'm recording this, so at night. So
Yeah, okay.
we're sun is ticking. Things are going to be starting to get pretty dark soon. So
Yeah, definitely. So, Mickayla, lots to unpack here. I'm pretty excited actually to kind of get into this chat with you. But firstly, tell us a bit about you, a bit about your backstory, what you're doing now. I'll hand it over to you.
yeah, the like highlight reel, I guess, of my background is really kind of two parts. The first is startup ecosystem, builder and champion, and then the other is much more heavily focused on investments. Um, Out of college, I first cut my teeth at the Department of Homeland Security's Center for Innovation. I kind of joke like it was like innovation within the government, which is somewhat of an oxymoron.
Yeah.
But what was really cool is like I was able to work with really big companies and figure out how they innovate, and then ideally kind of collaborate with the government. So we were talking, and this would have been 15 years ago or so, like talking about how the next war was going to be fought online and how social media was an early predictor of like current events. Like these things feel so normal to us now, but like we forget a decade plus like
Yeah.
how novel that was.
Mhm.
So working really with a lot of different technologies and understanding how that massively shapes the world. Government kind of moved a little slow for my liking. So then I went to a innovation center in a smaller market in Grand Forks. That led me down kind of an interesting path of foreign investments. They had received a federal designation to help foreign individuals invest in US companies. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. Like, curious to add international business to my resume. I was like in that early stages of like collecting experiences and
Yeah.
like, just building myself as an individual. And without realizing, like that basically set me off on a totally different career track. Um, Took over as the director of that regional center at 27.
Wow.
I was the youngest person on my team and the like team member who had been in the organization the least amount of time when I took over as the director. So it was really interesting managing a team of people that were older than me, people that had been there and had more seniority on me. But it was really fun. Throughout my tenure there, helped procure $138 million for the states of North Dakota and Minnesota. Got my broker-dealer licenses, so some of the like traditional financial like certificates and licenses, if you will. And then kind of during COVID, as with a lot of people, and there was a few other stops along the way, but still within that foreign investment industry, I really was thinking like, what else is out there? My passion had always been startups, but the capital that I was working on had moved me kind of later stage. And all of my clients, even though I was in Minnesota, at that point, all of my clients were coastal based. And so I got so tired of answering, like, why do you live in Minnesota? Nothing cool happens there. And I knew that not to be true. Um, and like, there's a lot of like themes in my story of like rooting for the underdog.
Yeah.
And that's just like baked into who I am. And so, like, I ended up meeting my now business partner, Reed. And we started Groove, which is a venture capital fund and angel network focused on Minnesota early stage startups. And so have been happily building and growing that portfolio. We've now invested in almost 100 startups,
Wow.
and are rapidly growing our kind of angel investor ecosystem. I think for me, in addition to the interest of startups and that kind of passion, I also like one of my North Stars throughout my career had always been championing women, really specifically to take agency over their money and their investments.
Mm.
And I definitely saw a way to incorporate that into the work that we were doing at Groove. And it was like once like my business partner Reed and I started to talk about how do we bring in more underrepresented investors? How do we bring in more women investors? That's when I was like, okay, game on, let's go. I'm ready to build with you. So yeah, that's kind of the long story, I guess, of how I got to being a partner at Groove Capital.
What a journey. Like what an incredible journey. And so like diverse in a way, but kind of interesting. Like you said, the common thread was this underdog the whole way through. And then look what you're doing
Yeah.
now. I've got so many questions for you. Firstly, how did you Groove just comes to my mind in terms of how did you come up with the name of your business? I always find this super fascinating, like Groove Capital. Where did the Groove
Oh,
come from
you're gonna love this. Okay, so you know when you're in a workflow and you're just like really enjoying what you're working on
in the zone?
and you're losing track of time and you're in the groove, that's the namesake.
Yeah, so it's like being in a flow state, right? I love that.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, and I guess calling your business that group capital, it's kind of that constant reminder to always like whether you're off track or not is to get into the groove. Wow,
Mhm.
fascinating. So talk to me a little bit about I love the language ecosystem and the interconnectedness of an ecosystem. I'm a big fan of that. And also the factor you talked about women and, from a, financial perspective and almost kind of getting their life in order and connecting the two together. Ecosystem aside, that's almost like an ecosystem in itself where you're connecting them from a life and work perspective as well. Not to mention the other ecosystem you're talking around the angel investor ecosystem. I love that so much because I find also that, women in particular, we have this kind of almost like, it's almost like a block or a barrier at times to being financially savvy. And you're nodding away at me like this. And even my own experience in terms of, I've always been good in business, but then when it came to my personal side of things, I was always like, oh yeah, I don't really want to go there because that's a little bit complicated. And then when I actually like took the time to actually like focus on it, I was like, this isn't as hard as it needs to be.
Oh
And
my
so I'll
gosh.
hand it over
There,
to you. But I just, yeah, how did you like, yeah, what kind of got you into wanting to connect that ecosystem of the two together? Mm.
yeah. No, that's a really interesting question because I don't know if I really set out to do that in a like mindful way. I just knew that those were two things that really were important to me. So in order to be my authentic self, like converging them and having those map like together, like allowed me to be working in a more natural flow state. Like so I always had been really interested and passionate about just like championing women in like business, the workplace, that sort of stuff. But it wasn't until a little bit later in my career that I really started to understand the interplay of how money fits into all of that. So like I think my first aha moment was the fact that like understanding like you really can't be an independent woman if you don't have your financials in order. So
No.
like if you do not have that financial freedom, you're not going to be able to leave a bad job or leave a bad housing situation or take a risk on building your business. So it's like that kind of to me started to become like that cornerstone of like a really important piece for women to work on. But like it's one of those things where you also are butting up against societal norms. Like we condition and like teach and talk to like our young boys about investing, but we talk to the girls about budgeting and saving money. And
Mm.
like even how we think and talk about things is just so different between genders. And it took me a long time to kind of understand for like research shows that like your attitudes and beliefs towards money get baked in by as young as 7. So like love my parents, they were fantastic, but I don't know if they were really consciously making decisions about like how to like introduce like the kids to money. And so I think for so many people, there's a little bit of like just having grace that like you have to unlearn some stuff in order to build new practices.
Yeah.
And it's so important because this shows up in my work in a lot of different ways. So like on the investor side, like these are individuals who have a higher amount of net worth, and so they're making angel investments. But a lot of them are grappling with the question of like tying their legacy into their investments and like really ensuring that their goals are reflected in how they invest. But on the founder side, if you are uncomfortable asking for money, that's going to show as a founder who's trying to raise. So like you have to have a good relationship with money on both sides of the equation. And like spoiler alert, like the more you like get at it, you realize like there's a lot to learn for everyone on both sides of that equation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really fascinating. I hadn't looked at it like that. And so you're almost like you're playing two sides to this, aren't you? Like in terms of, yeah. Mhm. And so
Mhm.
so with working with I guess not underperforming is the wrong word, underrepresented, that was what I was trying to say. People with underrepresented backgrounds to make their first moves in, for example, angel investing. What do you see is their like biggest is money one of their biggest barriers or blocks, or what is it along with that like yeah, if they're yeah underrepresented, or is it that they don't have the support? Is there a confidence thing as well? Like what is it?
So, generally speaking, and this is true for folks of all backgrounds, not just underrepresented, like outside of the financial means, the number one barrier to entry is time. Like, time is ultimately our most scarce resource. And because these investments do require a decent amount of time to like understand them, like you're individually looking at each company to see if it's something you want to invest in, it's time consuming. Certainly there's structures and like networks in place to like help alleviate some of that heavy lifting, but by and large, like that's one of the biggest barriers for just across the board angel investors. Once you get into more of the specific barriers for underrepresented investors, a lot of it comes down to awareness. Um, so like not even knowing that this investment is like an opportunity for them. Um, Outside of awareness, then you also have just like lack of confidence, but also maybe a lack of like understanding or knowledge.
Yeah.
And so that's like this mindset of like, oh, it's a sophisticated investment. Like I'm not qualified to do that. So it's really understanding and building, and that's been a lot of my work is building community and ecosystem and cohorts and events to really build out that skill set.
Yeah.
It's a muscle, and so if you're not exercising it, like, of course, it's not going to get stronger.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so when you do these, they when you're like educating people, where do you start? Like, what is the first, like, what do you get right back to basics? Like, how do you, yeah, because I'm always fascinated by this. Like, what are the like key three things that you generally tap into or talk about to educate them?
Okay. So this is unique to my kind of framing of things. And this is also going to be unique to my geographic location. So where I'm sitting in the US is middle of America, which
Mm.
is traditionally more fiscally conservative. And so because angel investing is traditionally a higher risk, longer term like investment, like if I started to talk about risk return and like a risky investment to a group of fiscally conservative people, I would lose them every time.
Yeah.
And so, in my opinion, I think that's where a lot of people have fallen short. Like when they're talking to angel investors that are not in these really large markets, like they just immediately go to like the risk and like return potentials. And that just like immediately deer in headlights, like, ooh, like you're
Yeah.
not speaking my language. So I like to start the conversations around what motivates people to potentially be an angel investor. And after working on this for years, I've kind of boiled it down to like three themes. And it's interesting because like gender and different demographics can start to fall more heavily in one theme than the other. So the one category that a lot of people kind of fall into is like this building legacy. So folks who are, thinking about tying their investments to kind of that the personal brand, who they want to, be remembered for. The next kind of group of people is like generally like being at the cutting edge.
Yeah.
And like our retiree group falls into this almost perfectly. Like they are so scared about becoming like irrelevant that
Yes.
they're like, I just need something to keep me alive. And this is a really great way to keep my brain sharp, stay active in the like community, learn about new like trends and markets. But this group, the being at the cutting edge group, it also kind of encompasses like the Bitcoin bros that are like looking for the next best thing. I call it kind of the corporate types, but like the folks who maybe are in corporate America, but they're like, what else is out there? Like I kind of feel like my soul's been sucked dry. I'm bored, but they
Yeah.
love their job because it's comfortable and it like provides them a lot of flexibility. So like they fall into that group too. And then for us, like that third bucket is this like idea of investing locally. So if you're gonna make one investment, like $1, and send that to Wall Street, like that has a set of impact, like economic impact. But if you take that same dollar and invest it in your own backyard, then you're seeing, higher job growth, tax revenue, and that $1 has a larger impact. I always am like careful, like angel investing is not impact investing, but for some people, like there is overlap in that Venn diagram. So
Mm.
like to me, education always starts with like figuring out what is really motivating you, like what's pulling at your
Yeah,
heartstrings.
and those three different groups, which is super interesting in terms of, which takes me to my next question because you're super strategic, right? In terms of, and you have to be in what you do because I mean it's quite complex, it's quite volatile, it's like it can be ambiguous at times. But from what I'm listening to and what I've like researched you on, you have this strategic insight, but you do it with heart. You've got this heart, and even listening to you just then and even what you were talking about from local to corporate to the other bucket as well, but you bring this deeply conscious approach to everything you do, which for me is super interesting because again on when you think about angel investing and venture capital, you do think about you mentioned the words cutthroat and things like that. And there's almost like this facade around what you do. But then I meet you, I listen to you, and I'm like, wow, you are super strategic with heart and you have this deeply conscious approach to what you do. Is that just something that's ingrained in you, or is that something that you've learnt along the way?
All of the above. It is kind of funny because in some ways, like I'm a little bit of a VC misfit. Like
Yeah.
maybe I shouldn't be here. Like because yes, like I believe very strongly, even though like I understand VC, like I believe strongly that capitalism should be accountable, that like we shouldn't deplete all of our resources just for the sake of like extracting as much value as possible. Um, and I think those kind of underlying personal views show up in how I build and create. Um, but I also like I can loop everything back to like why having more women at the table matters. Like this is also a really great example of how more women in key decision-making roles, whether that's business, government, boards, whatever that looks like, it matters. So I think the reason VC does get a rightfully like bad rap because the data shows it. Like, if you look at where VC dollars go, less than 3% of dollars are going to female-founded startups. Like, that's atrocious. Like, and like looking at our work, I can tell you there's awesome female founders doing really cool businesses and work. And that's true too for Black and Brown founders and underrepresented founders. But when you look at who's writing the check and who's actually in managerial roles in VC, Less than 16% of those with any sort of authority are females. So
Wow.
it's a very small
Hmm.
group of women. And I feel so strongly like the more women you have like at the table strengthens your business, strengthens your investment decisions. And so I think one of the things that like grounds me when I think of the future of the workforce and future of business, I do think it is more authentic. I think it's more collaborative, it's more caring. And I full-heartedly believe I think women are very well suited for the next stage.
Oh, I love that. Oh my God. And you're not, and you're like, I don't see you as a misfit. I see you as someone reshaping and redefining the future of VC. And, if that means that you call yourself a misfit, great, because you're not the status quo. And this is what
Mhm.
I'm all about too, in terms of how do we redefine, how do we reshape the future of work? But you're also incorporating that life aspect, which I love as well, in terms of it's a whole thing, it's a whole being, right? But
Yeah.
it's interesting, and I can relate in terms of, you know, women starting out or having their own kind of business as a founder or a startup. Like, I don't know, it's been interesting even my own journey, and you probably come across this a bit in terms of like I actually said to my mum the other day, when are some people going to take me seriously with what I'm doing with my business? I scaled a business previously to 20 million, and yet I'm getting certain people that still look at me and think that, oh yeah, she's just doing this thing, but she'll come around and she'll get back into corporate world. When I'm like, no, this thing is real. It's building.
Mhm.
Business takes time, and when you're evolving, etc. You must come across that a little bit, or you must have women that talk to you about that. Do you ever get that, or is that just something that I'm
Oh, of course.
saying?
I'm laughing to myself because my very first like career kind of job, my grandma like couldn't explain what I do, which is like cute and like this happens all over like, the scenario like that a lot of people don't know how to explain what their friends do and whatnot. And so in a conversation, my grandma said, "Oh yeah, Mickayla, she's like studying or taking up space and time." Like that was what she said. And I was just like, what does that mean? And like, how are those the words that you've described my work? Um, I think it's like, it's one of those things like once you believe in yourself and can like just take space in the room, like shifting your language away from passive like wording and like all of those like really subtle cues, I feel like that's when and then also working in your flow state, like I think that's when people start to like take notice and like start paying attention. But yeah, I mean, what is that saying? Like women like have to do everything but like in heels. Like it is that. Like
Yeah.
we have a very high standard of expectation for ourselves, but that's because those are the standards that are set for us as well.
Yeah, and then it's those standards that are set, but they're also like, for me, some of those standards are so old world now. It's like when you're out there, like you called it misfit. I call myself, I don't know, I just call myself a shapeshifter, reshaping
Mm,
or redefining what the future of work looks like, but also in life as well. I think you're also scared's the wrong word, but you're also making certain like people around you, some people feel uncomfortable because they're like, whoa, this is foreign to me. I want to keep it this way because that's always been the way. It's probably like we were talking about before with you in the VC, like, there's always been a certain way. It's kind of like where
hmm.
I've come from, there's always been a certain way. But who says
Yep.
there's a new way now? And this just comes back to this form of style of leadership, authenticity, that conscious leadership, the need to care. Like, I truly believe that
Mhm.
clear is kind, but there's this need to have more empathy and be more care. And I like to use the term soulful as well. Like, what you
Mm, yes.
leading from within here, it's called soulful, it's conscious soulful leadership. That's when you
Yep.
actually also have the ability to get into the flow state as well. And then the people
Hmm.
around you and surrounding you. well, everyone then fuels off it and feeds off it, and that's when everybody is able to become a better version of themselves, if you like.
Absolutely. I mean, it all comes down to like corporate culture. So like people kind of maybe are a little bit let down when we go to like look at the due diligence of the startups and keeping in mind we're investing at really early stage startups. So like it that would be considered pre-seed seed startups. Like what we're actually looking at and doing the most due diligence on, it's not the financials. These companies have maybe been operating for a year or two. It's like, yes, it's the like market potential and the plan, but above all, it is the leadership team and like their ability to attract customers, investors,
Right.
key like hires. And like it's just like everything boils back to it's all about the team. It's all about the team. It's all about the team. And it's for all of those same reasons that you just like mentioned. Like you if you have an option of like a subpar product or service, but a stellar team, or a subpar team and a rock star product, you should always bet on the rock star team.
Really? Yeah, that's interesting. That was not what I thought. Like, there you go again. Like, you're just breaking down all these assumptions, and I've had all these biases that towards, yeah, because I totally agree with you. Like, I mean, teams are like, you're only as good as the team around you. You're only as good as your team
Mhm.
around you, right? And so, like this, these leaders that think that, they need to be better than their team. I don't believe that either. I think that if you've got the team around you that make you a better leader as well, that's where
Mhm.
that comes back to that whole ecosystem piece for me as well, in terms of you can have the start of a product, the start of an idea, but you need that team, that all the different collaborators with all the different skills to be able to rocket fuel that product. And that's kind of how I've always,
Mhm.
worked in that way. So it's interesting that there's still somewhat a lot of businesses or, out there that don't necessarily see that, but yet
Yeah.
that's what makes the world go round. That's what makes the business go round.
Well, and I think it's like so in the startup world, one of the things that's challenging is like how you build company culture changes at different stages as your company's growing. Like what you're doing to build company culture when your team is four is obviously going to look different than what you're doing if you've got 400 employees. And so I think there's also this like you've got to constantly be curating and building meaningful culture and like being like a culture keeper, knowing especially like as your company is shifting and evolving, like that will change with it. Um, and so I think startups just like they naturally kind of feel that change. Whereas like obviously like right now too, like there's like new generations coming into the workforce. Like for the first time ever, like we've got five different generations in the workforce
Uh,
because like the older generations also holding on to like their positions and power. And so we've never had so many different viewpoints in the workforce before. And so there's also like really old school ways of like what company culture is compared to some of like the newer ideas coming up. And then you add in like how do you build company culture in dispersed teams? And so those are all like really important challenges, and like startups have to be thinking about that from the get-go.
Yeah, I talk about culture just on that. I actually call it energy. It's an energy, attitude, and a behavior. It's a living, breathing system. It's a living, breathing ecosystem. It's like, what's that heartbeat?
Yep.
What's that soul of the business? And how do you
Yes.
ensure that heartbeat and
Yes.
that soul continues? Because you're absolutely right. Like when we were scaling, like going from two to four to then six to then 10 in a team, it was this constant need to like ensure that the energy and attitude and the behavior and that heartbeat was beating, continuing to beat
Yes.
the whole way through. I think we quite often get caught up in this labeling of culture, if you like. But it's like, what is that? That's just a word. I've always thought of culture as it's just a word. So how are we actually living and breathing this through the business, through
I
the
really
system? Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that because like when you look at it, like shifting it the way you're thinking, I actually think it really jives with how I've thought about things. I always have like two like gut points that I like remind my team and like other people that I'm talking to, like when you think about building culture, the first like kind of gut check is like the Monday morning. Like, are you able to get up and excitedly do your job? And if so, like you probably are working in a team that has pretty phenomenal corporate culture or just team culture. Then the other one, and I feel like people love to like forget this, but like it is the reaction that you have when you see that you've got the Slack message from somebody, or like if you saw an unscheduled phone call from someone on your team, is that like, oh, I'm so excited to call them back. I wonder what they're up to. Or is it like your stomach has turned into a whole bunch of knots and you're like, oh my gosh, what's happening?
Mm,
That is just as much like corporate culture. And I think the reason it's hard for people to grasp that is because that's the energy. Like that's the energy that's flowing through your
mm,
organization. And it's a little bit harder to pinpoint because you don't get to just like throw a pizza party and check the box. It is actually doing the work.
mm. Yeah, so also interesting. And again, I feel like we could just go off on a completely separate tangent talking about this as another conversation, but I'm going to bring it back for a second in terms of we'll wrap it all together. What do you then, obviously that's a big, like opportunity, if you like, to ensure as like businesses are scaling that they're, kind of that heartbeat, that top soul is kind of continuing to beat through. What do you see as probably the top 2 to 3 biggest, I'm going to say opportunities this time, not challenges, that you see coming through with this? I guess, yes, there's 5 generations in kind of business now, but what do you see as like from a younger generation? What do you see as like the top, 2 to 3 opportunities that they're going to bring into business as we go forward? And what are you observing?
They're not taking shit from anyone. And I think that's great. Like they have a way of calling people out at all different levels
Hmm.
in a way that I don't think any other generation was willing to. Like we all saw it and we felt it,
We never
but
called it
like
that.
we also understood like you have to respect your elders and
Mouth
respect
shut.
who you're
Yeah.
talking to and keep your mouth shut. Um, and I think that's a really awesome way to hold leaders and companies accountable. Obviously, like when I'm mentoring like younger team members, and I do a bunch of mentoring at my alma mater as well, like I'm mindful of like you've got to be able to like package this information in a really like key way in order to like not put a target on your back, but like there's a lot of value in that transparency. And so I think the companies that are willing to like listen are going to be able to adapt a lot faster, um, and will ultimately be more relevant. So I think that's probably, in my opinion, one of the most exciting opportunities that I would see from like the younger workforce coming in. And then as the leaders like of these organizations, like we have to be a little bit humble. Like sometimes we're going to get feedback that we don't want to hear.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're going to get crap feedback that isn't relevant.
Mm.
And sometimes we're going to get some like just nuggets of like really awesome truths. And so I think that's where the leaders have our work cut out for ourselves to like sift through that.
It's such a good point in terms of just sifting through it. And I think again it comes down to for me that intuition, that ability you talked about gut, the ability to tap in and kind of go, well, actually what's real here and what's not, and kind of like as a leader,
Hmm.
you need that gut, that
Hmm.
intuition, and especially working with this younger generation. But I do think we have a lot to learn from them and they have a lot to learn from us, and you could bring the two together and
Yeah.
they could be this perfect match. Dare I say perfect's the wrong word, but like what a dynamic duo. Do you know what I mean? Like to bring it all
Yeah.
together. Last question for you. What is your biggest hope um in terms of just from a, for women and VC in general?
Yeah. I mean, right now, I think, especially with like news and headlines, it's really easy to like accidentally fall into like a doomsday scroll. And like we've got to keep our heads on a pivot and like, yes, be prepared for things to be changing. But what I love most about what I'm working on and the ability of being surrounded by a bunch of awesome investors as well as founders, like it is a cross section of people who are willing to be bold, willing to take challenges, willing to build, willing to, put their money behind people who are willing to build. And like that, when you surround yourself by people like in that sort of flow state or mindset, like it's just so inspiring. And so like that to me is just like the most exciting thing and what gets me excited to do day in and day out what I'm working on.
And the name says it all, just that groove. You're constantly in that groove, groove capital. I love it.
Exactly.
Well, thank you. So how do we find out more about you? Like where can we find, I'll put in this in the notes, but yeah, where's our best place to hear more about you?
I would say LinkedIn's a great spot for me. I'm pretty active on answering any chats that come through. I think I also have my email linked to that, so like that's a pretty safe place to send people.
Cool. And I do want to acknowledge one other thing. You were what did you I realized we didn't call it out, but you were 40 under 40. You were like you want to know what like yeah, what was can you quickly just what was that again? Like what was it for?
Yeah. So it's a pretty like
Prestigious.
impressive award that, yeah, prestigious award that's given out to business leaders who are 40 under 40. And I have to admit, I didn't really realize how big of a deal it was. My business partner, he was the one who nominated me, and it was actually very cute to like see his excitement, like vicariously being lived through me receiving the award. But then once I was awarded it, the amount of just like text messages, emails, like LinkedIn messages. I was joking with my husband. I was like, I think I needed to like hire a publicist for this, like to like just respond to all of the stuff coming in for that alone. So I was a little bit like amazed at how closely people followed it, and it was a really fun celebration and recognition.
Yeah, and I think we need to celebrate that more. Like we need to celebrate these, amazing achievements because you are doing so much greatness and, and it's for the good as well, like in terms of what you're doing. So, Amelia, congratulations on what a stellar career you've had, but also just the like energy you have and what you're bringing to, the VC world and the difference you're making. I love this. And so thank you and have a wonderful afternoon, evening.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for having me on. This was really fun. I enjoyed the conversation.
You too. Thank you.